Stories from around the corner.
And around the country.
You're listening to All the Best.
Proudly supported by the Art Gallery of New South Wales.
You're listening to All the Best from FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Kwame Slusher. Before we get into this week's stories, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm recording from stolen and Gadigal land and pay my respect to Gadigal elders past and present, and also recognize that the area where FBI Radio is situated, Redfern, has long been a place of storytelling, strength, resistance, and resilience for First Nations communities. You're listening to All the Best from FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Kwame Slusher. This week's stories call on us to humble ourselves before nature, to contemplate how different animals, even the ones that don't have the best reputations, make unique contributions to the world. And maybe, just maybe, there are some things that they know that we don't. In our first story, Andrea shares a love story about a dingo.
I am in love with a dingo. My sister named him Taz. He's been part of our family for 9 years, since we adopted him as a young pup from foster care. Now he lives on our property in a remote part of the Hawkesbury, Darug country. It's the perfect spot for a dingo like Taz. However, his wild side can be a challenge with my family's open door policy. Taz is yet another addition to our eclectic mix of rescue animals, which over time have included dogs, geese, donkeys, ferrets, lizards, and birds. Let's just say not everybody gets along. There's also the issue of livestock and pets on neighbouring properties. The truth is, Taz's prey drive is a danger to other animals, and farmers protecting their livestock are a danger to him. To keep everyone safe, Taz is only free to roam under supervision. But despite all this, his wild nature is exactly what makes him so special. Taz. Taz. Taz has an incredibly fluid way of weaving through the forest with his slim physique. Sometimes, when we run side by side, he can even appear airborne. His brindle coat camouflages him in the surrounding bushlands, and he knows all the right spots to hide in plain sight. Our favourite game to play together is hide and seek. He'll sprint to and fro and then plunge into the dam to cool down with these beautiful pricked ears, a big toothy grin, and a flicking bushy tail. Seeing him run wild and free is one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my life. Unfortunately, not everyone sees dingoes in this light, and their wild side is causing tensions across the country.
Under a full moon in the remote outback of Western Australia, dingoes roam freely. The wild dogs are found across much of Australia, and while conservation groups say they benefit biodiversity, the presence of dingoes can be heartbreaking for farmers.
They love chasing sheep and running them down and tearing their backsides out and tearing their throats and shoulders and everything else. I've seen them doing it. WA sheep farmer Chris Patmore began finding his stock had been attacked about 7 years ago, and he had to end their misery. He and other farmers in his region formed a biosecurity group, and together they bait, trap and shoot as many dogs as they can.
That report's from last year, but the dingo's reputation as an insatiable hunter goes back much further than that. Over a century ago, a ravenous dingo made an appearance in Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories.
Still ran dingo, yellow dog dingo, always hungry, grinning like a rat trap. Never getting nearer, never getting farther. Ran after kangaroo. He had to.
The dingo has always had defenders, though. and a debate about whether they should be hunted or protected has raged on for decades.
The question we'd all like answered, of course, is whether dingoes are goodies or baddies.
That's pioneering ecologist Dr. Alan Newsom in a 1978 CSIRO documentary. Almost 50 years later, the dingo is still cast as a baddie on the national stage. But dingo advocates say the debate isn't settled, and these days they're becoming more vocal than ever.
My first recollections of the dingo is, I guess, hearing negative things on the radio, the TV and things like that about, they're taking kids, they're doing this sort of thing.
That's Steve Trist, a dancer and educator who teaches Aboriginal culture.
I'm a proud Darug Murrawarra Yuin man. Grew up in Western Sydney, and my totems are the red-bellied black snake and the sand goanna. That's a part of the connection I have to country, and I'm extremely proud to be able to say that and be able to share it with others.
These days, Steve reveres dingoes. But back when he was learning traditional dance as a kid, there were media frenzies over dingoes killing livestock, mauling humans, and snatching babies. But something didn't sit right with Steve about the dingo's bad reputation. It didn't reflect the reverence with which his own community saw the dingo. Portraying native animals was an important part of some of the dances he was learning.
We all used to argue about who wanted to play the part of the dingo. And I remember asking a couple of the elders, why are we doing the dingo if it's such a bad animal?
That's when Steve learned the animal's true history.
I remember hearing stories around what they really were about and what they did for our environment, our mobs. So I kind of made connections there, and I thought, well, wouldn't the dingo have been our best friend like a long time ago?
In his book, The Dingo Debate, canine specialist Dr. Bradley Smith explains that traditional Aboriginal society had a symbiotic partnership with dingoes for thousands of years. They were taken in by the women, raised alongside their children, and, in some cultures, even breastfed. Dingoes aided hunting, provided warmth, guarded against intruders, and were spiritual intermediaries between worlds. After 1 or 2 years, dingoes would return to the wild. Thus, they held a dual role as human companions and top-order predators. Today, they are still vital to a balanced ecosystem.
There are some species that you take them out, it's not just about them. There's sort of a ripple effect goes out right through all of nature in that country, and other species start to disappear.
That's ecologist Dr. Barry Traill speaking at the Dingo Forum in 2023.
I cannot overstate how dingoes, probably more than any other single species in Australia, are such a species. You take them out, country becomes unhealthy.
In Australia, dingoes are a scientifically proven keystone species.
You take the predator out and the prey numbers go up. You get too many kangaroos, you get overgrazing, native plants start to disappear, and that flows on to mammals, birds, insects, and so on.
But if dingoes are so important to our ecology, why are they so demonised?
I'm telling you, for 233 years, you've been lied to about this animal. None of it's true. It's all false.
That's Sonia Takao. She's part of a dedicated Australian community campaigning for legislative changes to protect these apex predators.
I'm a Jedabal Rainforest Aboriginal woman from the Tully region in North Queensland. I'm also the founder of Dingo Culture, which is a platform to raise the Aboriginal voice for the dingo.
Like Steve, Sonia wants to dispel misconceptions about the dingo that have persisted since the dawn of colonialism. The most pernicious myth of all is that most dingoes are just wild dogs, hybrids with domestic dogs turned feral. This myth justifies the killing of a threatened species. In some states, the government even rewards hunters with bounties.
It's been going on way too long. Since the first fleet came with the sheep and cattle, they've been killing dingoes. And we need to change because it's not doing the environment any good.
Last year, an ally of Sonia's called Dr. Kylie Cairns found gruesome evidence of these killings. Kylie's a conservation geneticist, and she was on the lookout for dead dingo specimens on rural farmland. At the end of a dirt track, she found what she was looking for. 15 lifeless dingoes hanging from a tree in various states of decay. Back at the lab, Kylie discovered that all 15 were pure dingo. Further research revealed that most dingoes across the country are pure too. These findings reinforce the cultural case for dingo conservation with solid scientific evidence. But Australia is yet to catch up with the facts. For now, dingoes remain largely unprotected. Here's Sonia again.
There's no regulation when it comes to dingo management in Australia, so people can just kill them the way they want to kill them. And the Animal Welfare Act, all it says is that it's got to be humane. Well, I can tell you right now it's not humane.
It's even legal to manage dingoes with the notorious 1080 poison. This pest control can cause a long, painful, and violent death.
I've seen a lot of graphic stuff sent to me that doggers do. For Christ's sake, local governments are still paying trappers and hunters a bounty for the dingo's scalp. How colonial-minded is that?
But hunters say the viciousness of dingoes justifies their methods.
A lot of people need to understand that some dogs just like to kill. They get pleasure from it. Some say it's like a drug to them. This is reality.
That's pest control professional and recreational hunter Clark Mackay. He still refers to dingoes as wild dogs.
We see some people with absolutely no empathy for landowners and even less for their stock, even if they're standing in their own innards.
Sonia understands that farmers need to protect their livestock, but she's campaigning for non-lethal management like guard dogs, which have been proven to ward off dingoes.
There's already farmers out there that are using livestock guardian animals who say they've had zero predation since they went that way.
Sonia's referring to research by the Minimai Rangers, who manage an Indigenous protected area in northern New South Wales.
They've been doing their own dingo project monitoring, and they've been investigating the scats left behind for the dingoes. And their whole diet is a natural diet, which is high content of wallaby. They haven't touched sheep. They haven't touched cattle.
But not everyone is swayed by the emerging evidence, and conservative media are still casting dingoes as baddies. In 2023, a Sky News report echoed the same anti-dingo sentiment from Steve's childhood.
People who now want to visit Fraser Island, which is now known as K'gari in Queensland, have been warned to carry sticks for their protection after a 24-year-old woman was attacked by a pack of dingoes.
K'gari has been a dingo habitat for thousands of years, and visitors are given strict rules for staying dingo safe on the island. Rangers say tourists are ignoring them. The Sky News coverage didn't mention any of this.
Get rid of the dingoes. If you have a pack of dingoes that are biting people, you need to cull them. Do you want tourism on Fraser Island or not?
This time, Steve could see the one-sided coverage for what it was.
You're actually in its environment. If I come into your home and start taking things or setting up camp, how are you going to react?
For Steve, the solution isn't culling aggressive dingoes, but learning to coexist with them.
As Aboriginal people, we always believed that animal had more rights to be there than us. To this day, we're the oldest continuous culture in the world. How'd we survive for this long? And a simple answer to that is it was through the respect, the connection with the land, the animals, the plants. Everything had its place.
Thanks to the efforts of people like Steve and Sonia, harmonious coexistence with the dingo could one day return. In September 2023, a nationwide network of traditional custodians and dingo advocates united in Cairns for the first time. Sonia says the energy was electric.
The vibe was alive with like-minded people from across Australia, in particular First Nations people.
They were all there for the inaugural First Nations Dingo Forum. Featured guest speakers were from conservation, environmental law, and scientific fields.
We all came together for the very one reason. We're basically saying enough about how the dingo is being treated in the country. We would like, as First Nations people, our cultural heritage, our cultural values recognised in legislation.
During the closing ceremony, 20 different First Nations groups signed a landmark document, the Dingo Declaration. The declaration says, "Killing dingoes is killing family. We are one being, spiritually connected from the dream time to eternity." It rejects the wild dog misnomer and demands an immediate end to lethal dingo control. There's still a lot of work to do, but since the forum, Sonia has been campaigning for legislative protections for dingoes across New South Wales. And she's not alone. She's joined forces with an NGO called Defend the Wild, the Minimi Rangers, and the New South Wales Greens. Last year, 3 young Minimi Rangers presented the First Nations Dingo Declaration to New South Wales parliamentarians. They've helped to launch a campaign for a statewide inquiry into dingo management.
Young Maitland, Harry and Ian did a fantastic job. My heart, honestly, really jumped for joy because a lot of politicians and a lot of the staff in New South Wales Parliament came to support the event. Even the New South Wales Aboriginal Affairs Minister was there, and we even had an opportunity for the Minimi Rangers to go back and sit with him in his office and talk to them about their aspirations moving forward with dingo management and other Indigenous protected area stuff.
Sonia and Defend the Wild are also actioning a petition and raising funds for a cultural preservation project.
Our oral histories are really important and they need to be recorded. They need to be passed down to future generations, and the Australian people need to understand the importance of the relationship between this animal and First Nations people.
Since the 2023 forum, advocacy for the dingo is only getting stronger.
I'm pushing every day for change. First Nations peoples now are standing up and joining me. This is not going away.
As for Steve, he's doing his part through cultural education. For NAIDOC Week last year, I saw him and his boys dance in the foyer of a high-rise building in the heart of Sydney City. One dance portrayed kangaroos and emus grazing peacefully off the land. Then the didgeridoo came howling in to represent a dingo on the prowl, looking for a feed. The animals scattered to evade it. As well as teaching the next generation to dance, Steve's teaching them that dingoes need our protection, just like his elders taught him.
It was our job to actually protect the animal, even if it was classed as a predator. And we talk about our ancestors. You know, I'd hate to be talking about the dingo in a bit of a past tense sort of thing. And I'd hate to be, for example, sharing our dance and somebody comes up to me and says, "What's a dingo?" I'll make it my mission while I'm still around anyway to continue the story. I'll always have that dingo as part of my dance.
When I visit, I take Taz out for walks around our family's property. Sometimes a rustle in the bushes will activate his primal prey drive. He'll dart off into the wilderness, chasing after a monitor or a wallaby. My parents are weary of his wild side, but he always comes back to us. Eventually. He understands that we're family. The more I learned about the cultural and ecological importance of dingoes, the more I realised that my time with Taz in the bush was like a school. By observing how he interacts with me and the world around him, I can sense that this animal knows a way of life that is well beyond my understanding. The dingo is a radiant part of my personal story in cultivating a conscious connection to Darug country. Taz has taught me that wild is not something to be feared. Rather, it's an integral and intelligent aspect of a healthy and vibrant ecosystem. With the right heart to listen, the land will tell you its story through teachings of play and connection. These lands are the keepers of our lives and the guardians of our future generations. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Eora and Darug nations. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as to emerging leaders. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
That story was produced by Andrea Dixon. The supervising producer was Thomas Phillips. In our next story, a live conversation between two friends turns poignant when Seb and Sally recalls an unexpected encounter in a forest clearing.
I'll tell you stories based on what you ask.
What was your most memorable experience in Japan or anywhere traveling?
Yeah, I was in Sweden. I was really young, and it was a weird situation. It felt like being in Sweden felt like a fever dream because we'd gone there to meet my dad's pen pal from when he was a kid. It was just such a strange setting. We stayed in this Airbnb, which was an Airbnb that they had rented for us to stay in.
Who's they? The pen pal people?
I can't remember his name. Ferhad or something?
Yeah.
So in this Airbnb on the water in Sweden, just in the middle of nowhere. And I'm there, and I made friends with his daughters because they were there too. My sisters were there, and my brother.
Yeah.
And there was all these different thatched roof houses around that area.
Is this a populated area, or is this a little bit?
It was a bit out there. It was a lot of cottage-looking things.
Right.
But there was this big water house with a hot tub and this wharf, but it was freezing. It was freezing. I got pushed in the water by that dude's little kid. I froze my balls off. It was so cold, so cold. But so we went exploring one day, and it was just after it rained, and it was kind of foggy-ish. It was very thick, dense air. You could see the air. There were these mushrooms growing all over the thatched roofs, and it just looked insane. Because the thatched roofs, they build a bit of a moss structure over them, made out of different, I don't know, what are moss and algae? What is another word for algae that's not in the water? Algae? Is that the same thing?
No idea.
Well, whatever they are, they were all over the roof, and they made these crazy coloured patterns, yellow and warm colours that would cover these roofs of these thatched houses when they were wet, and it would sort of spring into life after the day it would rain. And the morning dew would sit on it, and it looked absolutely beautiful. And we went out into this huge grass field. You could just only see grass for ages. I wasn't very tall, so I'm in this grass. And we were walking through, and we got to the other end of this grass, and there's a forest, and just on the other edge, there's a big road going through the forest.
Yeah.
On the other end, there's more forest, and there's this massive white-looking moose thing, and it was just terrifying. It was the only creature that I've ever seen that I looked at it, and I was like, that thing knows what's going on. He knew so much more than me. He was just a creature. It was beautiful. I was just humbled by nature in that moment. I saw it and I was like, wow, that's a funky looking moose.
Because they're gigantic?
No, they're I don't think...
not the size, more just the energy of it.
All of it, man. I don't think
the moment sounds magical.
It was really magical. I felt like I was in...
a Ghibli film?
Yeah, a Ghibli film. What's that one with the weird things that click their head? And it's got a moose in it. It's not a moose, it's a deer. Forest spirit.
I don't know.
Princess Mononoke. I felt like that.
Oh,
it felt like I was there. I was like, what is this thing? But they're gigantic. I think I was small too.
Yeah.
But I think even to a regular person, they're almost their legs finish at your...
not rare as hell?
I don't know. I don't know enough about moose. I don't even know what the plural of moose is.
After that magical moment, you didn't get experienced or educated on meese?
Meese?
On meese?
I'm not a meese professional.
Oh, shit.
I think they are rare. I think it might have been an albino one. I don't know.
Ooh.
I think it might have been a grey moose. I don't know if the grey ones are rare. Maybe it's an elk. It had its antlers if you were to like turn its head sideways, almost spanned halfway through its body. And its body was maybe 3 of me lying down, and it was up.
Did he see you?
Yeah, looked at me.
Did he care?
He didn't care. It could have ended my life in a split second.
There's something sick about an animal that could just, if it chose to,
if it wanted to,
but it just,
we would have locked eyes and it would have just ended my life in that moment.
Yeah.
But it was pretty far away. But even far away, it looked absolutely monstrous.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that's terrifying.
But also actually, that experience there was the one experience that I've had that has made me so conscious about the environment.
Really?
That's the only reason why I'm very environmentalist and all that bullshit is because that moose scared the shit out of me. I don't know. I feel like he'd come for me if I did something silly.
So you're not an environmentalist out of love for the planet, it's out of fear.
Not fear for the moose. I just want I want his family to be all right. Like, he looked chill, and I know that he's got people for him.
He does.
Yeah.
I thought
that was a surprisingly poignant story.
That moose really did shake me to my core.
That story featured an impromptu conversation between Seb and Sally, 2 friends who sat down to record at the end of a public storytelling event we ran at the Powerhouse Museum in 2023. Recorded by Phoebe Adler-Ryan, editing and production by Mel Bakewell, music by Blue Dot Sessions. Whether you're a storyteller or story lover, tune in to new All the Best episodes each Tuesday at 4 p.m. You'll discover stories created by a host of independent audio makers from so-called Sydney and around the country. Make sure to hit follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or tune in to FBI Radio 94.5 at 9:30 a.m. on Sundays. All the Best is made at FBI Radio on Gadigal land in association with SIN on Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Boon Wurrung lands and ACCC on Arrente and Warramungu lands. The All the Best editorial producer is Mel Bakewell, and Phoebe Adler-Ryan is our executive producer. Patrick McKenzie is our community coordinator, and thanks to all the volunteers who help to bring you all the best each week. Shining Bird composed our theme music, and Annie Hamilton designed the artwork. We're heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network, and were made possible by the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find our full archive of more than 500 episodes at allthebestradio.com. I'm Kwame Slusher. Thanks for listening.